A lot of excitement. Yeah, I can tell. The idea of a matter talk, and it's going to be a different one, because normally we do these over Zoom, and people in the audience can actually jump into the conversation. The name comes from the mate, which is our traditional drink here in Uruguay. And it's because when you go to a friend's house or you invite someone over your house, at this time you say, hey, come over home and let's share some mates and talk. Like, it's like talking over coffee or a beer. Well, that's how we do it in Uruguay. We normally share the mate and chat. So this is a sort of a round table that we have. But we have a lot of audience today. So if in the middle of the conversation you want to jump in, raise your hand or speak up, okay? So that we keep it interactive. So this is a new panel this year, thanks to David and Alex for agreeing to stay for another season. So maybe today, and we decided to jump into the topic of what's going on with the sports in entertainment, specifically with the streaming. And maybe to go back a few years back, when streaming wasn't the big thing, we were used to having HD, low latency, kind of flawless, because it was let's say that satellite and IP and cable networks were pretty robust, easy to manage. They worked. If it worked, you knew everyone was getting the exact same quality, like the same bit rate everywhere. Yeah, we have some echo here, right? Yeah. Do you know where we're getting the echo from?
TV.
The TV?
Can we mute it?
Hope we can mute it. And then new players got into the market, like Netflix. And then the people said, let's move to streaming. But we had actually very efficient ways to transmit the same video to everyone, either multicast or broadcast. And now we're doing it in a not so efficient way, which is a lot of unicast. So World Cup in the past would be like one operator would transmit it once, and maybe millions of people would watch the exact same stream at the exact time. And now we have millions of transmissions, one-to-one, each of them probably in different qualities, probably in slightly different latencies, different conditions, also different devices and experiences. So maybe I wonder, did we improve? Like, are we any better? But let's stick with what Scott said, like, it's getting better. So maybe to kick off the conversation, where are we now in sports and streaming and what's changing? Because we all saw what happened last Christmas when Netflix got into sports at a high scale or large scale, global scale. Of course, not the first global streaming event. We've seen many before, but I think it was like the VOD platform now streaming sports, and it turns out that we now have 10 different applications, or 20, or 100, and now we have 100 different devices, mobile, connected TVs, dongles, PCs, whatever, where we can watch them in different networks, because now we could be in a mobile network, it could be a satellite network, it could be a satellite internet network, and so on. So are we any better, and what's the current state of sports and in streaming, and what are the current challenges? Who wants to jump in?
I mean, I'll just say that culture drives technology and innovation. It always has and always will. So culture, watching a football game or watching the World Cup, drives technology for the technologists to get it right. So what's starting to happen, you saw with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson's fight, all the problems that arose from that. But as technologists, we knew everybody at Netflix was going to get it right on Christmas Day with 2 NFL football games. And there was a lot of pressure for them to get that done. And some of our friends have moved over to Netflix from live environments to basically go work and sort of make that work better. But it's become more economic, where they want to force people to go to these players to watch, to build subscribers. And that's predominantly why video and sports and the ability to scale has become so important. Last weekend when the Kansas City played the Bills, 57 million people watched it on television, right? Because that was primarily where you were going to watch it. But if you force people that the only place you could watch it was on Netflix or on Paramount Plus, then that would force all the technologies to do what you can. So again, the culture of watching football or the World Cup drives technology. So if HBO Max and others are going to force people to watch it only there, then that's where sports and technology are going to have to work together and make it all work perfectly.
Well, I mean, I think, JP, you talked about like, oh, back then it was better versus now. Well, not that many years ago, doing an event, 3-5 million, that could be record breaking, right? For the industry, right? The Tyson fight was over 50 million, right? Yeah, 60 million. And there's new problems because of that. And regardless of what you did the old way or the same way, now there's issues of general internet saturation, ISP saturation, that you could have the greatest network to be able to deliver. You could be using all the different CDNs or one that you built yourself. That's just so beautiful. But if you can't get that last mile, you have really poor experiences and so forth. And that's one of the challenges. And some of that comes down to predictability, right? If they'd known they were going to have that much, they likely would have done things differently. And as would anybody, right? If you can be prepared for that. And that's an interesting factor is, we're having this really large variability, I think, oftentimes in viewership with events because sometimes they really take off and sometimes they really don't. And how do you really look to manage that in a constrained environment now that we have these capacities, we have these implications that really can affect that end result? And it's not an easy solution that you can always do in the middle of an event without causing really large implications.
I thought you asked a pretty interesting question earlier about, did we go a step back when we moved to IP? And I think, you are right in some ways, right? So yeah, latency did increase. I think the problems are different, right? So back in the broadcast and cable days, if you had a poor connection, you would just, get a poor picture, maybe lose it entirely. And now, we're dealing with, buffering and resolution will decrease and things like that, right? So it's just like the way bad reception is manifested is different than it was before. But I do think we've also improved in a lot of ways. So I think quality actually of video and audio that you can transmit over IP, I think now is getting to a point where I would say it's pretty consistently better than cable, in my opinion. I think cable has been so highly compressed to that really when you start looking at at it up close, it does not look great. And so I think companies that have been doing live streaming for a while and that care about video quality are able to deliver really good video quality over IP. So I think we're improving there. I think the other advantage we have is that we're not necessarily being held back by broadcast standards, waiting for adoption, waiting for set-top boxes to be rolled out, right? So as devices out there, various streaming sticks and smart TVs and so on, as they start to support HDR, as they start to support object-based audio like Dolby Atmos and so on, right? We can start delivering to those devices as soon as there's enough of them really to receive it. So we don't need to wait for a whole new broadcast standard to be implemented and adopted. So I think we're able to move the quality a little bit faster, I think, than before.
I agree on that improvement that in the past, if you wanted to start transmitting 4K, then you had to have all new set-top boxes enabled with 4K out there before you could start.
Yeah.
Now you can start actually distributing it for 5% of your users, and it's fine. I get it. Yeah. And I agree on that. And also that you had a limited bandwidth, so you could transmit 500 channels, 200 channels, whatever, but you could not transmit one event per person. Now potentially you could now transmit one content per person. Actually, that's what social media is mostly. Like everyone's watching what they want to watch when they want to watch it. But where we also, because at some point when the streaming platforms came and the subscription model came, it was like, oh, cable unbundling, and now you had to pay all this money, and look at these, streaming is going to be super cheap. Now you pay $10 instead of $100, and you're getting all you can eat. How much do you need to pay now to get all you want to eat? Like, are we getting anywhere there? Like, where are we also on discoverability? You used to have like one APG, one source of truth in your service. Like, where do you see the challenges now?
Oh, it's a shit show. So, I mean, it's a multi-pronged issue. You have rights issues of who can watch what, where, down to geo-specifics. You can go down to apparently your specific spot on the beach, apparently, if you want to lock that down. But you know, there's also the subscription fatigue. There's every platform wants to own and maintain their own, and then they also do it differently, and you have different quality differences and discoverability because of that. Everything is so distributed and so forth that it really creates a challenge to find what you want. And then if you do you have the rights to watch it on there, or then you have to go to another platform, and whether they have, you know, varying degrees of subscription and pricing and so forth. And that's something I think is really going to draw more and more kind of user frustration, and hopefully this will come back around in the circular ways that things do, that we can look to solve that. But there's not a really good, clean view in sight I see that's going to really look to address, like, hey, I can watch whatever I want when I want to, and it's reasonable. Or I can even find it, for that matter.
So the largest rights agreement that's coming up is UFC, MMA, and that's the next big one, and it's going to be in 2026 that those rights are coming in. And they're already talking about $1 billion for having the rights to broadcast that all over. So if you're UFC, you're going to make as much money as you can. And if that means you got to basically slice that up to get 4 different versions, some on Netflix, some on HBO Max, some on Paramount Plus, you're going to do that. And will that be at the advantage of the consumer? Probably not. But that's where, again, if you're a shareholder or, well, they're not public anymore, but Endeavor or Silver Lake, you're like, I got to maximize the window that I have. And so I'm going to divide this up into as many different slivers as I can so I can maximize the revenue.
But do you think that's one of the things that's really driving down the viewership in sports as a whole? Like, is that one of the major reasons why oftentimes we're seeing a lot lower lows within this?
Yeah, what I would say is you're also seeing really, really highs, right? So in the States, what was it, like 92 broadcasts over-the-air TV was NFL football, right? So maybe NFL is an anomaly, but I just think more and more on the sports side, the NBA is going to make $72 billion. Think about that. $72 billion for this new rights being divided, right, by Amazon, NBC, and Disney, right, and ESPN. And they got 3 vendors willing to pay $2 billion roughly a year for NBA rights. That math is really hard to make that money back if you're one of those rights holders. But the league's like, hey, come on, if someone's willing to pay that kind of money, then I have to go out there as part of my players union, as part of the owners, to go do that. So, I think at the end of the day, sports drives technology in so many different ways that I think it's good for the ecosystem to basically understand that. And you get these large audiences. We were talking earlier, Casey and I, it's like so many people have stepped in this shit show so many times, like, okay, it's coming, it's coming. So how do you basically get smart people to multi-CDN strategy, a rope that allows you to kind of slowly build the audiences up. So it just happens where people will just get better. And as long as sports keeps being pushed over IP, people will get smarter and they'll start to figure it out because they have to. It's part of the business, and that's how people compensate and pay for rights.
I think a lot of the times the challenge is not in the technology, right? Right now, our culture in those large media companies we're being driven by the dollar amounts, right? So WBD, we lost NBA, right? And so as a result, right, our teams are out there trying to acquire content and licenses as fast as they can. And then our ad product team, they're trying to sell ads for those events as much as they can. So now we do have a disconnect between, on the technology side, what do we have to offer, as well as on the business side, how does that pan out in terms of revenue, right? So a lot of what we end up building is not the best user experience or quality, but what generates most dollar, as well as in that contracts, what are the terms that is demanded by these leagues to govern those dollar earns, right? And then that's where we ended up focusing our attention. But then we also have to look at all these security measures, right, that Ian talked about. CDN tokens, the logs gets really, really big. How much does that cost us to implement those solutions so we can govern the rights to the content providers? Now, these are the problems that we ended up solving, and they're not necessarily innovative. They're not bringing our user the best experience. But then it ties to contract, it ties to dollars. And that's a lot of the time where our eyes are now.
And then you have Amazon, who sells a lot of toilet paper. And that's another revenue stream that allows them to go pay for the rights. They also have this incredible AWS server room. So they can find alternate ways to pay for these rights, whereas sort of traditional media companies are kind of stuck with, like, we're not selling toilet paper. The only thing we got is a subscription product or ads. So it's very hard to kind of,
well, I mean, I think that goes towards the number one priority, I think, across our industry right now is profitability. And that might sound like, well, duh, we're all here to make money. But, you know, the element is how and what decisions are driving that. And it's not always what's easiest or best, or users might want the most right now. It's about, I think, perfectly stated stuff like, Connie, what you said, and also, you know, operational efficiencies and so forth that they can do. That has been the primary focus for what seems like most larger streaming providers for the last couple or few years, and is going to continue to do so, especially because, you know, a lot of them are challenged to make actually a profitable platform, because that is a big deal. There's a lot of cost that goes into this stuff. And hopefully we can get to the point that, yeah, then at some point they're back towards trying to, no, I want the user to be happy. I want them to be on my system, versus, and tracking them other than just like, well, they have no choice if they want this content.
Okay, makes sense. So there's a lot of room for innovation yet, because now we can work on targeted advertisement that we couldn't back in that times I was mentioning. Like 15 years ago, we would never even dream about targeted advertisement on cable networks. We can now actually think about even sending ML-generated content targeted to a specific audience, at least to tease them for what they could watch in the future, and so on and so on, given that we have that, like, it's feasible, but also it's way more expensive to invest in all that technology. Like, it's actually not necessarily improving user experience. So there's a lot yet to be done but also profitability. But I know, and profitability in the short term.
Innovation right now, more investment in optimization.
Yeah.
I might turn this off. It's back.
The unpredictability is a huge challenge, right? So when the Mike Tyson event comes out and it was 16 million peak concurrent, right? I ask myself, if I had that load, what would happen to my platform? Right?
Or as Casey would say, is like, I don't want to be that guy. I'm out of live sports. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to be stressing out that everybody's like waiting for DOS attacks on the servers to bring down the feeds. You know, all that. It's stressful. Yeah. Like, live sports is really, really stressful.
Very. And, you know, from my perspective, I'm a player developer. I don't actually get to deal with any of the crazy complex stuff. Like, I'm the end of the line, the glass, and even that's stressful. Like, on a live event day, there's nothing I can do. You know, if the player goes down, I might be able to upload a fix, but then what, do I send out a tweet and tell everybody to refresh their browser? Like, there's not anything I can do to force my fix to go through. And even with that minimal amount of work that I have to do on a live event day, I'm stressed out of my mind. And part of it is because, you know, something I learned at working at EA or just as a UI developer is that every problem comes in as a UI problem at first because the user is interacting with the interface when they see the problem happen. And so, most of my job is just hunting down, it's buffering, so now I have to go collect a bunch of CDN logs and figure it out and shuttle it to the right team who then actually has to go do some hard work to fix it. But yeah, it's incredibly stressful, and you're sitting there for hours, until the event's done. So I can't imagine what the people doing the real work have to do on that day.
But then, like, conversely, Amazon's doing a great job on NFL Thursday Night Football, where if Alex uses Amazon Prime and he buys pet food, he will get, in the commercial break, a pet food ad. So think how high that CPM is if a pet food brand can go, hey, I want to buy some inventory. I'm looking for everybody who watches the NFL that is a pet owner. So you can basically increase the CPM, get a higher CPM than, say, traditional TV, and then maybe I get like a mountain biking ad or whatever it may be. So there's variances for those technology companies to really personalize, like you mentioned, to offset the cost. But a lot of that, infrastructure, like David said, it has to be set up prior. And traditional media companies, they just don't have that sort of thinking and mindset to pull that stuff off.
Do you think we're going to see the end of like big sponsorships, like we've seen with Super Bowl ads and like World Cup sponsorships, where you see the same Coca-Cola ad over and over again? You think we're going to see less of that in the future because there's going to be more personalization and more targeted advertising?
I mean, what I see now is laziness, where you see a buyer, a media buyer, and say someone from a media company, and they're like, I'll deliver you 1 million impressions. And then if you click on the video, you get the same commercial or pre-roll every single time. It's like, we're in 2025. Don't we have a mechanism that says, Alex already saw that pre-roll, go find him another one? But that kind of stuff, I think, is difficult to do at scale.
Well, the technology's there. It's just it's the content. Like, it's, there's frequency caps and all that you can set. But if you don't have the inventory to fill it otherwise, you're going to drop what you got. And that's why, how many people have seen the same ad like 10 times through an event, and it doesn't help, and it hurts the brand to some regard too, because then you get an annoyance relation with that, which isn't what they were paying for. But like that's a consistent problem. Like, we have really cool technology, but we don't have the content, the inventory to always fill that properly. And what's the driver of that? Is it that we're just not getting that much interest, or that they don't want to put their dollars in there, or they don't see the returns, or whatnot? But it's something that once again comes back down to the user experience and poor experience for users, but it's still bringing in some money. And except for when you have these really large events, then they're out there, they get those really filled and sold, and then you have a better experience generally at hand. And that's when you can actually get that customization and personalization, because you have enough data and information and inventory to actually do something with it.
But that does tie back to optimizations, right? Because whenever you're talking about personalization, especially ads, you're talking about a lot of compute that you cannot cache, right? Because they're personalized, right? So I'm going to tell a story that kind of ties everything together, right? So it was the first presidential debate, and predictability. It was really, really hard for us to predict, of all the traffic, how much that is going to come to the new platform versus the legacy platform, so the Max versus the CNN platform, right? So our projection was off by 200%. So we were massively underscaled, right? Now, everything was okay because we kind of scaled our system with some buffer. Comes the first ad opportunity. Our ad servers went down. Now, when things started to buffer or it just stopped working, what do? Retry, right? Okay, so in a sense, a thundering herd of users. Now we already under provision. Now we got thundering herds of people hitting our entire backend infrastructure. Well, that took down kind of all of the East Coast, right? So what did our player partner did? Not that day, right? They implemented some logic like where they're gonna disable the event, the player events, if they detected this, right? Now, fast track forward, I forgot which event that was, right? We had that thundering herd issued again. We survived a bit longer, right? But revenue, personalizations, it ties back to predictability, right? So if I'm looking at projection now, if this championship is going to be held at UK, involve one of the home team that happens to be at UK, that traffic is astronomically higher than otherwise. But there's no way we would know. So I had to update my CDN partners every week, right? But you can't ask your partner to provision. They need to preserve those hardware way ahead of time. So that is still a problem that I don't have a good solution to solve for live events.
It's awesome, right? The CDNs, this is great. You got to make a reservation, but you got to do it 5 years in advance in that window.
Yeah.
And there's a cost associated.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And if I tell them I need this much, and then I give them this much, I get a lot of angry emails or Slack messages or phone calls. Right. Yeah.
But I think the beautiful thing about it is people are watching on glass, and that glass could be a mobile phone, could be a TV set, could be an iPad. So it's like this catch-22. We invented this problem by giving the ability for people to watch their favorite sport on any piece of glass. So because we did that, we got to get better on serving more bits on any piece of glass at any given time.
But that does make me super excited for the SGAI project. I'm really excited. I'm not, yeah.
So, but now we have all these new glasses, you said. I know Casey has a lot of job to do because he has a lot of players and devices.
Build more players.
Yeah,
faster.
devices. The number of devices is becoming a headache. I like to say smart TVs are the new IE11. If anybody had to deal with that. IE6. Yeah, actually, I should say that. But like from a player development standpoint, the whole dynamically served ads to a person on a massive event, that one keeps me up at night. You know, like even on VOD, we're trying to get time to first frame quicker, and when you have a pre-roll in front of that has to be decisioned, you know, that's just on a normal everyday VOD piece of content. On a live stream where you've got millions upon millions of viewers and all these decisions have to be made, like that's scary. I was talking earlier that the Super Bowl in a sense was a little bit easier because every single ad is exactly known at wall clock time when it's going to be on, and so there's no decisioning part. And even that's tricky, getting all that stuff right, getting the tracking for it correct so that everybody gets paid. And so, yeah, not to say that it can't be done, but like that's going to be a hard problem to solve at scale, I think.
And yet the Super Bowl was like, what, 40-something seconds behind? Like
something like that, yeah.
Like it, so still like probably like 30 plus seconds behind what we had in the Olympics in 2008, almost 40 seconds behind.
We just got to send Luke in that deck to everybody in the world. Luke's got to quit the Discord job, start his own consulting company, and bring the bus deck to everybody.
Yeah, well, actually, what happened to your player and the riverfront was similar to the Luke's presentation. Reminded me of the retransmissions, but with the refresh. So thanks, Luke.
We can also think of it as an opportunity. If we're 40 seconds behind live, that means we can pull those captions in earlier. So then we fix that captioning delay problem.
Beautifully synced.
See how we're doing that? We're bringing it all together at the final presentation.
Monte just brings everyone together.
That's how Mata works. But also there's room, because let's stop complaining about it. Like, let's be, I think there's some positive side to all these. And we know what you live from, like what you're making a living now from. And I think there's a lot of room for innovation now. In 2008, you couldn't have any interactivity or good interactivity with the sports you were watching. It was impossible to think about having like a good second screen experience, even worse if you wanted to have on the same screen. So I think there's still a world of possibilities. I understand that this is a financially stressed time where optimization is coming everywhere. There's also consolidation. So a lot of companies also wasting a lot of resources just like reorganizing just because they bought 3 new companies and all the time. And also new companies coming here and your thoughts. You said something earlier that made me think that this is not only a technology problem, this is a cultural problem at the media companies, because you don't only need the technology, but you also need to change processes and mindset. So where's let's say that at some point we're gonna get there, that the ads are gonna be personalized. Media companies are gonna make money out of the ads, and it's gonna be profitable. Say we go 20 years forward, and we get there. Where do you think we're gonna see the new innovations gonna come from? Like, let's say that we fixed all the basic stuff to make it work. That we have server-guided insertions, we have great players, we have enough bandwidth in the CDNs, we have the best codec that's optimized. Like, how do we improve the experience?
Well, I mean, I think Netflix is doing it, right? They're the only profitable streaming company, and they basically manage the whole supply chain from the content that gets created. So you could get a show like Squid Games from, South Korea that's like, whoa, like that blew up, but they had someone in South Korea looking for a piece of content that would drive this adoption. So, people say it all the time, content is king. I mean, I would argue to a certain degree, it very much is, the case, right? With Game of Thrones is, the same thing. When HBO Max puts Game of Thrones out, that first episode of the second season or the third season coming up, like, there's a lot of people at HBO Max going, just, shit, this sucks. Is it going to crash? Is it going to break down? Have we bought enough CD-ROM? So I think a lot of it is culture as well, and sports is sort of leading sort of that fandom and that tribe of this, being a tribe of a team that drives this innovation in this culture. And I think you'll see, people will just get better. And I was really excited that, yes, they slipped on a banana peel. Jake Paul, I mean, who would have thought that Jake Paul would be fighting a 57-year-old Mike Tyson? But everybody around the world was like, I asked everybody, it's like, I want to see the train wreck. I want to see what this is going to be. And, they learned, and the next time they'll, even like they did with the Christmas games, and you're going to see them start to move into sports, because as you saw in the last fourth quarter, I think they had 19 million new subscribers, and a lot of that was because of sports, and that's a business relationship, right? We used sports to drive new signups, which allows us to create more money, which allows us to spend more money on infrastructure. So it's almost sort of a whole flywheel effect.
I mean, content's king, user experience is queen, right? And they have to kind of go together. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to continue to improve upon the user experience. It's not just a matter of like the bits getting there, there's discoverability, there's all these other elements to that. But even with the bits getting there, that's a challenge, right? As we run into these ultra scale events, or for lack of a better term, and the key thing being the unpredictability. Like, yes, we can do almost any size event if we know ahead of time, well enough ahead of time, to be able to manage that. And that becomes a big challenge. And that's one area for innovation, as well as like the collaboration, interactivity, and things like security, right? How do we actually, when we have these authenticating repaid events, how can we better deal with those when we need to boot people, when we need to manage those, when we need to do geo restrictions and so forth? There's continual routes that are working towards some level of improvement, and I think there's always room for innovation and what could be something very different and very new.
I heard, like, on Thursday Night Football, Amazon has hundreds of people just staring at servers for DOS attacks, because there's so much pressure on them that they drop the mic, so to speak, and the NFL has an outage or somewhere else. It's like a shit show, right? So that hasn't even been figured out, right? That you're going to, no, you're coming in tonight. I don't care where you are on the planet. You're going to look at the AWS servers in multiple regions of the world, and you're going to sit there, and you're going to see that if there's anything happening, that there's at least a self-healing event that the servers can bounce back. But that's how important it's become, culturally, that these events are so important and that you're spending so much money. We got to figure out how to make it right.
Well, I mean, and I'm going to pick on Casey, but the reality is, that's a lot of that is the player. Like, the first time most things, I mean, if you're lucky, you got someone looking at your servers and they're monitoring, they see, oh, we're trending in a bad direction. Majority of the time, it's the player that says, oh crap, something's not working, and it's your fault, right?
Always.
Right? It's your fault until proven otherwise.
Yep.
And it's your job to prove it otherwise, right? And you have to go and do that.
It's a game of not it.
Right. And it's a matter of like, okay, well, I'm here. I have all these things that I know how to do to go and try to find out what might be wrong and use that to come in. Okay, great. Now I have proof it's your fault, right? And that's an interesting challenge. And then it's, in a live event, there's no time. It's all pressure. And, it's great. We can learn from this, but how do we adapt from it, especially in the real time? And it's tricky. And the player is going to be the key part for that. And there's probably not a real good solid answer now on how we can make that better, because it's always something new and it always comes back down to everything funneling to that. But it's job security, buddy, so good.
Yeah, see, I'm sitting here thinking about can I get Puppeteer to run a browser headless and like try to automate any of this, at least the data collection side of it, I don't know. There's definitely some interesting stuff that we could try to do.
I mean, I think it is very much automatable, and so I think we are moving in that direction, right? So I think the observability has improved a lot and continues to improve. So in the early days, it was very much a black box. Like first, streaming events we did like in the late 2000s of that were actually like at a fairly large scale. We were kind of throwing stuff over the fence, and we had no idea was it landing or not, right? And we had to rely on Twitter to find out if people were having issues or not. And so I think we have come a long way since then. We do now have a lot of QoE instrumentation in the players, right? So we know, for example, when the actual customers are having issues, we don't need them to call us. We don't need to read Twitter. We can actually look at Conviva or Mux Data or whatever client analytics we're using.
And when in doubt, look at Dan Rayburn's blog.
Exactly, yeah, and Dan will tell you. And then, in addition to that, then, we now have CMCD, so now we can look at CDN logs and look at, so it's like we started with the clients, now we're moving up the stack, right, to CDNs, and then we have observability in the origin and the contribution. So eventually we're going to get to a point.
Common error codes.
Yes, and common error codes. There we go.
Yeah.
So we are going to get to a point where we will not need eyes on glass. Like there will be no need for somebody to actually sit in a room and look at a monitor, because there's nothing they're going to be able to learn that hasn't already been recorded in some log somewhere. The question is just how do we get to those logs and how do we analyze them?
How far are we?
Yeah. Pretty far.
50% there? I don't know.
I think
Halfway.
we're pretty far because that's exactly what my teams are doing. So we are working with our player teams, right? Get the CMCD into our log. So basically, the player can tell that back to the CDNs. Here's how full I am, the buffer in the player, right? From all the segments that I'm getting fed. So if the buffer is getting starved, right? We know from the player side there might be some transient CDN issues. That is not just client-side metrics. Because if we just look at client-side metrics, it's really hard from the moment you press play to the moment the first frame arrived, where did something happen wrong, right? But if we can get the player to directly communicate back to the CDNs, and then on the platform side, we consume those logs, so we can get data from the player, we can get data from the edge CDN pops, as well as the origin shields, as well as from the origin shield, we can collect origin request logs. So that's time to first byte as well as time to last byte. So we know when the full object is received, which marks it safe for the player to actually be able to play versus a partial, potentially corrupted objects. So we're collecting all of these to have end-to-end observability, and we are especially focused on live events, such that we can minimize buffering, minimize playback failure. Yesterday, I saw this amazing book called Video Infrastructure for Babies, and the very last page, by the way, I sent that to some of my other colleagues. They all checked out eBay.
Someone may have bought all the remaining books off of eBay
No. That
in
was
this
a
room.
lie, because they were able to find additional books, right? The last page says, and you will see no buffer will ever. I was like, right.
But like in what you just described, like an element there from the event that you recently had, or not recently but had, but ad decision goes down, right? The end result is Casey gets called because, hey, all these players are buffering. What the hell's wrong with your player, right? There are disparate systems that still get integrated into all these different ways and can be very different from each platform and so forth.
I mean, we have bypassed, right, where we can turn off ads. but that is only at the beginning of the sessions when the user first hit play. But then we can build in additional logics where potentially on the CDN side, where we integrate with the manifest stitching service, that's where you stitch those ads into your main program, we can potentially bypass ads. This is over there too. That's something that we can look into. So they are innovations that makes us nerdy people really excited because we get to sleep, maybe, right? So that does makes me really happy.
I'll share a quick anecdote. So Steve Ballmer can get really angry. And so he bought the LA Clippers, right, for $2 billion, whatever that was, 15 years ago. And we at the time were, Turner and was running NBA League Pass. And we literally had a Ballmer alert because he used to scream so loud, this isn't fucking working. I can't see my Clippers. This is bullshit. You guys suck. So he said, hey, at the time we had Conviva instrumented on the back end, and we're like, what's your IP address, sir? If you give us your IP address, we'll trace it. And 9 out of 10 times, it was never us. It was the pathing of Ricochet Rabbit hitting multiple CDNs, the last mile, and then, he'd be just like, oh, okay. And that's what you would have to do. Literally, we had one person on the Ballmer lead of 32 owners in the NBA. He was the guy that would be the big problem. But because we had instrumentation and innovation, we were able to have, oh no, sorry, it's not us. It's your last mile. There's a guy digging a hole down the street from you, and he broke the fiber. So it's really interesting.
And I do think a lot of the technology that's been adapting, everything from content steering, SGAI, and so forth, is a matter of how can we get things out of the critical path. Yeah. If something goes wrong, the stream must go on, right? And how do we line up our technologies around that so that we're always playing, and things can break because they're gonna, right? And if we do a good job in that, and we have these awesome players that have different types of failure and retries and other situations, we can get better still. Like there's still room for improvement.
And I would just say sports is going to drive the scale, and it's going to drive the innovation. So that's a good thing, right? So leverage that. Try to figure out how you can make things better. I mean, Scott's presentation on closed captioning, don't even get me started. I'm like that 57% that can't hear anything, so I love, closed captioning. Things will get better, when the demand and people are looking at things. So, sports is kind of, maybe some people aren't sports fans, but it is driving so much of the technology so that when large events scale, whatever it may be, there's better sort of safety nets to make it happen.
Excellent. Love it. I thought Alex was going to say something. So what's next? Because again, we all started talking about problems, but what's next when, say there's this wonderful world where CMCD, Common Access Token, Common Error Codes, the CML, everything is integrated, it's working, we have server-guided insertions, this is scaling. What comes next?
In my opinion, sports is all about tribes. And so if you can, like Twitch did some great stuff back in the day, and I don't know if Luke was there, he probably was, but when they started doing NFL football games with sort of, influencers, right? So I could pop into this room and see a guy funny call a game, and can I scale like Manningcast is, and in Brazil, there's a very famous, I forgot his name, Live Mode is a company in Brazil, and they have a very famous soccer, influencer that everybody watches the soccer game with. So I think you might see as innovation increases, you might see more one-to-one, right? You might see one-to-one ads, you might see one-to-one experiences, and that basically creates more time spent, more engagement, and more ads. So I think that's eventually where it will go, but you got to get the core infrastructure so it can handle all those different nuances.
One of the things I would like to see is actually more choice in terms of, do you access events because you're a subscriber, or do you just want to pay for a single event? So I would love to see more transactional, the same way we have like TVOD, like rentals, right? More pay-per-view kind of options, so that it doesn't, if you're interested in just one event, right? You just want to watch that one NFL game, you just want to watch that one Olympic event, that you don't have to, pay $50 for a monthly subscription. You can pay $5, $10, whatever it is, for just that event. and make that kind of the standard option, right? Where basically anybody can, for any event, for any kind of sport, like that's always an option, right? Like I would love to see that.
So it's like we're making rounds and rounds. Like we had pay-per-view, and it was like only subscriptions. Let's remove all the friction, and then pay-per-view again.
Right. It's sort of like for music, right? It's like, you can go buy a song, or you can go, pay a subscription to, Spotify or some other service. You can, go listen to it how many times you want. But, right, you have the choice. And right now, as viewers of live events, we don't have that choice. It's sort of like you've got to be a subscriber or you get nothing. And I would like to see us move away from that.
And then you see the churn, right? Game of Thrones is over. HBO Max loses hundreds and thousands of subscribers. NFL season is over. EPL is over. Peacock loses all these subscribers. So they're anchor tenants to drive these subscriptions to keep them whole throughout the whole year, so you don't have the peaks and valleys. But it's seasonal, and you see a lot of this churn happen, and that's another big economic situation where it's like, how do I fill those gaps with other types of sports so that you keep the consumer, or other types of shows, to keep the consumer.
Excellent. Audience? Yeah.
I'd love to understand better why we're not talking all about VR. You look at the headsets and the experiences are amazing, right? And we can of course point to the technology challenge of the weight of the file format and everything, but it's got to be more than that. Why is VR not more of a competition in this space?
Yeah, it was going to be one of the things I was going to as far as a personal wish for sports, just more interactive viewing. VR, great. How about just the ability to switch a camera, or drag and change a camera angle? My son plays soccer, and I've got this camera that has two cameras that point out. It stitches them together into a single view. AI follows the ball. I get an edited, sports game from this one stationary camera there. A sports event has.
I think that's coming soon.
I'm pretty sure it is, but it's been coming soon forever. I mean, even just being able to switch camera views. So that kind of stuff, second screen stuff, I think I personally would like to see it just get more interactive as opposed to a static viewing experience. And VR would be cool,
I think you're looking at Apple Vision, and I think that's a good example of that's a really cool headset, but $3,500. I'm not sure if I'm going to go down that path. Oculus is obviously sort of the price point that people want to do things. Ironically, the quarterback of the Commanders, who had a really great year, what's his name? Anybody remembers it? So he basically in college used VR to train, to look at different defensive schemes, and he became so good at it that he carried it into the Washington Commanders, and they built a whole infrastructure for players to basically do the VR, just like you would do in a game, and get the simulations. So that's, funny enough, in sports, that's where it's sort of going on the training side. And I think one day, you will have a scenario where maybe you play along in a game, like you're actually a point guard in the same game that's actually being on TV. I just think the mechanics and the...
I think it's a hardware thing. So for me, to me, I think we could solve this, the streaming, the delivery, the kind of the content perspective. And I think that isn't the challenge. I still think from the mass kind of viewer and adoption perspective, and it's twofold. One is cost, but two is form factor. They're large, they're heavy. To wear those for hours on end, I mean, for me, it's a hell no, but I also, I struggle because I have glasses and I find ones that work it. But I still think, once the form factors really evolve further, get smaller, lighter, and hopefully the cost, continues to adapt in the good direction with that. Yeah.
You have to pay a lot of money to get the rights to do something like that, and
Sure.
then you need the audience to be able to afford the rights.
Right.
I think also because of the form factor, I think it prevents a communal experience, right? You can't have 5 people over to your house and all of you wearing headsets, right? That doesn't work. But if we could, get rid of the headsets, then yeah, I think that will unblock that.
Great. So we're almost there. We have 5 more minutes. So we had to wrap it up. I would say the title was Streaming Transforms Sports Entertainment. But you're next. Let's change the title to Sports Entertainment Transforms Streaming, because it's actually sports transforming it.
From a live perspective, yeah, it's a leading kind of decider.
Nico?
Yeah, I know you guys talked a lot about the issues that you guys are currently facing, quality 4K HDR, like personalized ads. I was wondering, like for each of you, if you have like the power to shift all the industry focus into one issue, what would that be? Like, what would you like to take out of the table of all the things that you guys discussed about that has been issues like massive stuff, like massive delivery, or like focus on quality or personalized ads? I don't know. I would like to hear what you would remove from the equation.
So this summer, my company got to work for the Olympics, and what was really interesting is the Olympics has multiple broadcasters around the world. But I see a day where Netflix gets the Olympics for everyone around the world, like in 2032, because that's when the next rights come up. So the simplicity that David was saying earlier about like it's a shit show trying to find where the content is, I think for me as a consumer and sort of on behalf of the consumer, wouldn't it be great just to go to Netflix and everybody gets to see the World Cup? Go to Netflix, everybody gets to see. So that's where I would push, where could you centralize the technology and the distribution? But a counterintuitive to what I said earlier, that at the Olympics, you want to get as much money as you can. And maybe Netflix does write that check, right? But that's where I see a central point to see your sports and no friction to get access to it.
In Brazil, we have the other way around because we all, on global, we always had. On global, we always had the rights for every kind of sports, every kind of events. But now the rights are going to other players, to other companies. And the customers are feeling just like, as you said, oh, I only needed to go and watch things on global. But now I need to go to Disney, to Paramount, to other places. And it's getting hard for customers because they were accustomed to going to one place, and now they just cannot. And now we need to do different things to go in and create better experiences. Maybe give a smoother streaming for them. And so it's hard to see how things are going.
Yeah, there was a Yankees outfielder 2 years ago who was home run. I can't remember his name. It's so awful. But he was at the pace to break Babe Ruth's record, 62 home runs. You would have had to subscribe to five OTT subscriptions in order to follow every single one of his home runs. Like, that's just crazy. But again, the Yankees are getting paid 5 times. MLB is getting paid 5 times. So yeah, they're like, yeah, that sucks, but we're making money.
Connie, if you were to put everyone's focus somewhere, where would it be?
I will agree with what he was saying, right? Content is king, right? Because we, at Max, we put so much effort, like Alex will know, right? How do we bring the best quality live content forward? But if we don't have rights, like, our technology doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we're a media company, we're storytellers, we're unfortunately not a software company. If we don't have the content, our users don't see our technology. Yeah.
I could also, besides Netflix, I could see YouTube TV.
Yeah, you made me really sad.
Yeah,
I'm getting out of job.
But I think the problem is going to be it's a matter of money. Like Netflix, there's some giants right next to them that I think have enough time before 2032. Because you have Google, you have Apple, you have Amazon, you have X. Like there are so many technology giants out there. Like
Well, it's interesting you didn't say Globo, you didn't say Warner Brothers, you didn't say Disney. So isn't that interesting, right? Like you said, those tech giants are going to be the ones that are competing for the Olympics in 2032, not the Warner Brothers and Disneys of the world, the Globos of the world.
Unfortunately, I think Evan already said that. Like the tech giants are already there. David, sorry, because I want to. Oh.
Just one question. Don't you see also like a future as, for example, Paramount, Disney now are direct to customers. Barcelona is going to be maybe in 10 years direct to customers saying, yeah, you like Barcelona, just subscribe for our club and I would send you a t-shirt and you can watch all the party, all the matches because you don't care maybe to watch the La Liga, all the competitions, just to watch Barcelona. I'm going to follow Barcelona, Yankees, and I don't know, a Messi, maybe. Yeah, it's just the for
that,
sure.
That was brought up on the last Spotlight Talk, and I forget who it was. Somebody British talking about Premier League and how the way that they do it in the UK is you follow your team. And I find that interesting, you know, having recently gotten into football. But how does that work? Do I now have 20 more things I have to subscribe to? I don't know.
I mean, a perfect world is you don't have to subscribe to them, but they can get a profit share because they own the rights. If you had a single source for, hey, I can access them from here, it might be delivered through someone else or whatnot, that would be really cool. I don't think that's really realistic right now.
Yeah.
Right? Because then we're talking about, hey, I have a universal player, right?
Well, isn't that what Google does for us when we search, and everyone then gets their part of the ads served? Like, there's one place where we go and look for everything. What?
It's cable.
Yeah, it's cable.
It's cable, yeah.
It's cable again.
Yeah.
And we said it's good. We're going in circles. So yeah, we're back to cable.
I mean, the only problem I would see with that is that then the Liga would suffer. The league would suffer, because then if Barcelona or Madrid's allowed to do their own OTT and you could just watch their games there, then the other smaller teams, Atletico and others in other parts, the league collapses. So it's almost like you need Barcelona and Madrid to drive the league, but you have to basically have the rights so that it can be distributed equally.
What you mentioned is if Barcelona does that, so at the long term, you don't want to watch the games because I'm going to be bored because the Liga is full.
Right. And the same problem happens, right? Because they're making so much money anyway, they get the best players. So then it's the Harlem Globetrotters, you know, beating the Generals every single time. Well, but that's what they want. But then what happens is then people get disengaged because they keep getting beat by Real Madrid. So there's going to have to be a balance, I think, or a salary cap.
I think the other downside of having sort of one team, like one rights holder for an entire team, for example, is that what do you do for casual viewers of the sport, right? Like how does somebody then become a Barcelona fan if they never get a chance to see the club play, right? So like you still need to have some sort of access,
pay-per-view access as well. I mean, same thing.
Yeah,
Like, hey, I can subscribe to my league, but I might want to do a one-off on a couple other games just to see how.
That's what social media is for. You get 1 minute clips, then you like it, and then you subscribe.
You had a question in the back?
Yeah, it's weird. Like I find streaming sports really interesting.
Dylan, we have to hear you.
Like I subscribe to Peacock to watch like the Premier League games, but like when I lived in Seattle, like I'm originally from Chicago and I love the Chicago Bears. The only option for me to watch the Bears was to subscribe to NFL Sunday Ticket, which required me to pay for every single out-of-network game. So like, and it was like
$300
a couple $100 a month or a couple $100 a year. And like, I don't understand how there's not a better option to watch like out-of-network NFL games right now.
Did you hear me earlier when I said rights are a shit show? That is what I meant.
Yeah. I mean, do you see that changing like very
It
soon?
needs to, but
Yeah.
like that's the problem is right now it's such a battle for dollars and rights and locking that down. Like there was a whole thing like in Colorado, like you couldn't watch your home team for like a half a season because you couldn't access it through any of the local providers there. This was even on cable. It was messed up. Like the rights have gotten so skewed and all over the place in some situations. That's a really big problem. It needs to get addressed. It probably will. Will it be quickly? No.
One more thing, like even like I have Sling too at home, and like it's not even enough for that to watch the Chicago Bears at home. I also need a cable box or like an antenna to watch the games. Like if you want to watch it, if it's on CBS, if it's an AFC game, or on Fox News or Fox. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a major challenge right now.
I'm actually curious, like, are these problems exclusive to the United States? Like, do these happen in other large markets? Brazil? Yeah, okay. So you have, like, local blackouts and things like that?
But I think it's mostly in the States because people have a higher entertainment budget.
I just thought it was because we complain more.
What?
I just thought it was because we complain more.
No, I think it's because you can pay for it. You can afford it. Like, go and watch a soccer game here, and probably you could invite all your friends to the stadium for the price of one NBA ticket. Like, It's totally different.
I saw the promotion video last year for your guys' soccer league. It was good.
Yeah, it was good. Isn't? Yeah. Ian.
Today you're talking about, the NFL selling their rights to Netflix or something like that. What I foresee, the reason we do that, right, is because we have these big tech companies that have a special set of skills, special set of people, special infrastructure. 10 years from now, that's not going to be special, right? And that's going to be more of a commodity that, quote unquote, anybody can use. I foresee buying direct from NFL, buying direct from NBA. Why would they sell their rights to someone else when they can run it themselves? Today, that's because it's very specialized, right? And just like everything else, it becomes commoditized. NBA will have a NBA network, an NBA CDN, live streaming. It's, all of these CMCD, all these things that we talk about that's going to make it easier is going to, I believe, make people run their own networks. So
yeah, as long as they can make the same amount of money than if Netflix was paying them. So that's the key. A lot of people have tried to go direct to consumer for a team, and they're like, no, don't do that because Fox is paying you so much more than you can make direct to consumer. And that's sort of, NFL again is different, and I think you're 100% right. There could be, it's, when the rights dry up, but, the greatest thing about the NFL is every time rights fee comes up and like, oh my God, we got so much more money. Why would we ever do this ourselves? So I think it's like one of those things where, and then also you could talk about distribution and how many more eyeballs are going to see it. But I think you're right. I think there'll be some sports that they'll turn away. Maybe they don't get the broadcast rights. Maybe they can't afford it, and they're going to have to bring it in-house. And because it has been commoditized, it won't be as difficult to spin it up.
I think a lot of it, where I see you going in the future, it's not going to be an either or. Like, it will be both. Like, you can maintain and you can solve rights, so it can have the broader spectrum. What you can also still provide your own, and maybe one's only on a more pay-per-view, and the other one's on the subscription side, or so forth. But that is something that we used to see. I know with Super Bowl, stuff like that. Hey, it was broadcasted on NFL.com, but also on one of the big letters and so forth, and you could choose what experience you wanted to go to, whether or not you knew that it was all coming from the same streaming infrastructure or not.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Bars open? Is that what you just said?
Bars open, definitely bars open. So maybe just if you want to share your last words, what's your wish for sports entertainment, and for how sports entertainment should transform streaming? Casey?
Oh, you're going to start with me.
Yeah, we all know you're going to say no more connected TVs. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's not sports related. I just want all the old TVs to go away. I did the math at one point, and I think you could just have to raise $10-20 million and pay people and just buy back those old TVs and throw them in a landfill and give them a new TV, and it might be cheaper than having to pay all the developers and all the infrastructure that's needed and all the infrastructure that's needed. No, the work won't go away because we'll get to all use new cool stuff and have the fun features that we've been asking for forever, which will never run on an old TV. I'm never going to get multi-angles or VR on a 2010 Samsung, but those things still exist in the wild. So it's not necessarily sports related, but it is my one tech wish.
Thank you. Alex?
All right, so already I think mentioned the pay-per-view option. I think that'd be cool if we had that in addition to subscriptions. And then no more blackouts, right? So just if you subscribe to something, you get access to all the events regardless of where they are. So I think if I could have those two things, that would already make things a lot easier, I think, for most consumers.
Excellent.
I mean, I think we touched, already on the ones. To me, it's the fragmentation of rights and subscription fatigue. How do you bring that back so that you don't have to have everything all over the place? But we'll see.
Excellent.
I have to echo these gentlemen, right? So get rid of those super old legacy devices, right? And some of them, they are these old giant cable boxes by the broadcasters. So they are sent to their end users, and we are looking at having to provide, having to package our entire catalog, okay, because they don't support single key or multi-key encryption. And then we got content that requires multi-key encryptions by our studio providers, right? As well as, license, fragmented license and rights. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just gonna say, just be careful, because if you keep charging more money, fans may walk away, and they may just get so frustrated. And what's really cool that we haven't talked about, maybe we'll do that next year, is youth sports. There is this now with COVID that drove so much adoption of seeing streaming of youth sports and the expectations of. So I think that might be an opportunity in the future where that sort of replaces. But just be careful, because I think there's a point where the consumer is just going to basically say, it's not worth it for me anymore.
Totally agree on that.
Or piracy increases. I mean, as you have this interesting element of the more you charge, right, the more effort I'm willing to put in to not pay that, because I think it's absurd, and therefore, people find alternative routes to find what they want, because fans are fans, and God bless them, right?
Welcome to Latin America.
But that's a challenge with that, and and it's always going to be a cat and mouse game when it comes to content protection and even access control, right? Things will be circumvented. You got to come up with new things. It becomes cat and mouse, and you don't want to over motivate your people to find alternative means.
And it's expensive. Anti-piracy is so expensive.
So to you guys, the sports entertainment people that are watching, get rid of the old TVs. Make rights easy. Make a subscription or getting access to the content easy. All that? Any more wishes? And stop messing with the fans, or they're going to start pirating the content? Okay, perfect. Thank you all very much.
If you're buying a new TV, talk to Casey. Yeah. I talk
Thank
to
you all
my
very
player
much.
people.
If you send a picture of you destroying your 2010, he'll give you a beer.
Photo. Okay, let's take a picture first. And look outside. Now you guys get to see Montevideo.